Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mad Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me is my co-host Mort. How you all doing this evening? We are going to give a quick shout out to our sponsors. halfardeen.com is the place you go for the private matrimonial experience. Go to halfardeen.com and set up your marriage profile in as little as 10 minutes. wahidinvest.com is your place for halal investing. Go to wahidinvest.com and set up your initial investment with a minimum of $100. And finally, mywasiya.com is your place for the creation of a Sharia compliant will. Go to mywasiya.com and get your will created, and in as little as 15 minutes. We have a special link in the description below. Make sure you check that out and save some money by utilizing that link. Morty, what's going on, brother?
What's up, brother? Assalamu alaikum. How's it going?
Ooh, I just messed up our... Okay, there we go.
Oh, we still have Noreen on the green screen.
Yeah, nah, I fixed it.
Okay, cool. Perfect. Alaikum assalam, Yusuf Sayyid.
Yusuf Sayed joined the... I think I know Yusuf Sayed.
You couldn't hear me?
No, I think I know Yusuf Sayed.
Oh, you do? Okay, very nice. Very, very nice.
So
So what are we talking about today, buddy?
there's a lot going on, Mort. Actually, there isn't. It's just a lot of pain and misery. Did you hear about the attack in Mali?
I did. The Dogon hunters, as they call them.
Well,
So, yeah.
Mali is an interesting location, and I'm glad Sheikh Daoud Walid was the one who actually tweeted out the massacre, and that's when I found out about it. And I felt like there are deaths that like New Zealand that make the world news, but we as Muslims, as content creators, we have some sense of responsibility in making these kinds of atrocities better known to people, so that they're a little bit more informed about these things. And I feel like we do a good job of kind of breaking things down and simplifying things so that people can understand some of these complex situations a little bit better. And Mali's no different. Mali is a very complicated situation, and there's so many different variables to the whole country and how it's structured. And it's a place that's very close to many of our hearts, because it's a place that was an institution of learning for many of the scholars. And being so close to Mauritania, many of our scholars who've studied abroad, they've visited Mali, or they've been to Timbuktu, which is a historic city in Mali. So there's a lot of connections there, and there's also a strong presence of the Maliki Madhab that came from Mali as well. It used to be a part of the Sokoto Khilafat, which was a Khilafat that was started by a 18th century scholar named Uthman Dan Fodio. He started this Khilafat in West Africa that spread throughout West Africa, and then his son took over and helped it grow a little bit more. And Mali, I believe, was a part of that Khilafat as well. So it was a center of learning, and a center of a lot of just some of the best Islamic culture and learning throughout West Africa. I think it deserves some attention in that regard. And I think we should just kind of briefly explain to the listeners a little bit about how Mali is situated. It's in the west of Africa, and there's a map for you guys, so you guys can kind of see what Mali looks like. It looks kind of like Louisiana, but flipped around, right? More,
Yeah, kind of like that.
yeah, right,
And Bamako is the capital of
right.
Mali.
Timbuktu is what it's known for.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, have heard of the famous city of Timbuktu and all the ancient relics related to it. But Bamako is more towards the south. And a little bit about this region of the world. It's situated just below the Sahara. So this region is called. I think the dotted lines are actually what this region is representing. It's called the Sahel, Sahel, and
Sahara means desert.
Sahel. Yeah. So
Yeah.
and it's a very it's a region that has a lot of nomadic people. Mali specifically has nomads called uh, I'm blanking right now. The Fulani. The Fulani people are on the bottom of the country, and on the top of the country are other tribes, and these are a mix of Berber and Arab tribes that are mainly in the northern part of Mali. Now, Mali is also a French protectorate. It seems like it's the government is, for all intents and purposes, it's a failed state. It's being held up by the French forces. It's a victim of colonialism, and it seems like there's also now a jihadi presence in the south of the country that's kind of making things a mess. So you have the Arab and Berber tribes up in the north. That's one faction, and then there's the Fulani people in the south, and there's the element of the French and their puppet state, and there's also the jihadist element. So there's between 4 and 5 different actors kind of playing a role in Mali, and that's why it's so complex. And the victims of this latest atrocity, where 130 people were killed, were all from the Fulani tribe, and it was apparently a retaliation of the so some of the soldiers that were killed from the government side. I believe a couple weeks ago is when I believe ten government soldiers were killed, and uh, it seems like a couple days ago, a bunch of people who were dressed up as force or hunters. Mort, you know a little bit more about the hunters. Help me out.
Well, the Dogon hunters are, I mean, the Dogons are, as Sim mentioned, there are different groups in Mali, and Dogon hunters they belong to a Dogon tribe. And these people are very ancient people, actually. They have an ancient history in Mali. They have their own indigenous, like, animist religion. And so it's like a traditional African religion, but they were pretty big on like spirits and like different things like that. And they also basically, they're very superstitious in a lot of ways, but there is a lot of uh, ancient history with them regarding astrology and some of the information they received, with astrology. Somehow they gain that information.
Yeah.
But anyways, they've for a long time they've resisted conversion to Islam. They've kind of retained their own identity, and that's partly because, for the most part, in Mali, Islam was pretty much, it was pretty much peaceful, meaning that you could do what you wanted to do. Nobody really enforced anything upon you. You weren't forced to change your religion. Only until recent, as Sim mentioned, there's some extremism now that has caused problems with the rise of Al Qaeda in that region. It started, I think, back in 2010, I think, where you first see some of this, Al Qaeda presence in Mali. I think maybe some of that came out of what was going on in Libya as well too, and things like that. Um, but the Dogons are pretty much very tribal, and they're known to be hunters. Like, they go out and they pride themselves on these things. They actually, they go out and they pride themselves on being expert hunters and killers, and they've adopted modern techniques like rifles they've gotten from the French era and the colonization, and so they've been having a problem with the Fulani tribe. The Fulani tribe,
They blame the Fulani tribe for allying with the jihadists.
that's what they claim.
Yeah,
They
that's what they
claim
claim.
that
We're not saying that they
the Al
do.
Qaeda in that
Yeah.
region are, using. They claim that the Fulani is actually channeling them some kind of, resources and money, And so, in retaliation for what happened to some of these Malayan, soldiers, they just ransacked the village and began slaughtering everybody. They began hacking people, beheading people, and shooting people. And that was apparently in retaliation to what had transpired with the Malayan soldiers. Yep. By the
So
way, just real quickly though, for some Muslims who don't realize this, Mali also played, specifically Timbuktu, played a very important part in Islamic history in terms of spreading knowledge. It became for a while, it became an epicenter almost for getting knowledge and studying Islam. And that was partly due because of the fact that they have a very old tradition of how they teach. They had like almost pretty much outdoor madrasas, very common to what you see in Mauritania today. A very old method. They have these washboards, like these wooden boards that they have, and students would write on the boards, and it would write an entire board full, and they would not wipe anything off of that until they memorized that, and they would spend maybe days or weeks memorizing what was on that board, and then they would use a washcloth and just wipe that off, and then they would essentially write more stuff back on there and then memorize that. So it kind of serves as that purpose as how we know today that when you write and then read and then obviously memorize, it becomes easier to memorize and understand concepts when you actually hear them or read about them and then you write them back out. You're able to process that information and actually think about it and also memorize it. So partly because of that, and also because of a very interesting man in history, his name is Mensa Musa, who was actually coined the religious, I'm sorry, religious, the most richest man in the history of the world. At one point, it was reported that he had so much gold when he went for Hajj. He had, I think, something like, don't quote me exactly about this, but he had 12,000 people walking with 2 kilograms of gold each. And he had, I think it was something like 35 camels that had like 15 or 20 kgs of gold on each. And everywhere he would go in on his journey to Mecca, he would build a masjid. So imagine going through Africa and then going, through that region. And every Friday, when he would stop, he would build a masjid and he would leave it there. And he got to a point where he actually went into Egypt and the Hijaz. He got to Hijaz because you have to go through Egypt to get into Saudi Arabia. And apparently, on his way back, he had flooded the market with gold to the point that it was so saturated, the inflation. He actually had to buy back his gold in order to kind of regulate the prices because the price of gold dropped because he flooded the market with so much gold unintentionally. And then what happened was he had to buy it back out. But apparently, according to history, that is the only time in history when a single person was able to change the price of gold single-handedly in all of that region. And to that day, that still stands. And it's also rumored that the way he got power was his brother actually was an explorer and took off from Mauritania to, the I think it's the sea that was over there, the Atlantic, yeah, and got lost. He was apparently either he was going to America or knew of trying to get there, or he got lost in America and he never came back. And Mensa Musa basically inherited this very, very wealthy kingdom. And he was a very, very interesting person in African history and even Islamic history.
well, what's compounding a lot of the issues surrounding Mali is, even climate change. There's a whole lot of redistribution of how the resources of the country are now. Before it used to be kind of balanced between the north and the south, and now most of the resources of the country have traveled more towards the south, and that's kind of caused a lot of anxiety among the various people in the north. Um, there's also been various takeovers by the jihadist groups surrounding Timbuktu, and that's affected the tourist revenue that comes to the country. So but I think the jihadist forces were kicked out of that location in the north, in the Timbuktu region, and life has kind of settled back. But what's causing a lot of the problems now within Mali is that there's a lot of ethnic tensions now between the various tribes. There's a lot of suspicion towards the Arabs. There's people who kind of see them as sympathizers of the jihadists, even though there's not no necessarily there's no direct link. It's just paranoia, and people are worried about survival. And when you're kind of at that stage, you're you're looking to blame someone for the situation you're in. The problem is that a lot of these people fail to realize that the people who are keeping their government in power are responsible for this. This is the French. This is the direct result of the French. It is my belief, and this is my opinion alone, that if the French so chose, they could completely remove all the jihadists out of the country, but they need to keep a jihadist element there to make sure that the government has an umbilical cord directly to them, so that they know that there's a check in place. And that's how the colonial countries always operate. They always make sure that there's always some kind of a power dynamic there, so that people don't ever feel like they're free, that there's always a dependence to their colonial master. And in this case, this is a country now where the official language of the country is French. So you know how vested France is in Mali. So they're setting up not just a French protectorate, a French colony. It's a country that they're aiming to uproot Islam from there and make sure that people distance themselves from the faith, and make sure that they inherit French values and French culture, and the language from there, and that's how colonialism is. And it's weird talking about colonialism in this current century, but that's the fact. You can call it many different terms nowadays, but it is what it is. But I don't know if you
No,
had
you're
any.
absolutely right. I mean, there's definitely a play here. I mean, we've seen in different parts of the world, even where there's not so much turmoil, we see a hand in play here, right? We've seen what happened with people getting involved or nations getting involved in, Libya, in
Right.
Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq. I mean, Lebanon. You mentioned Palestine. You mentioned it. Even to the point where it may not be militarily, but politically, in Saudi Arabia, in UAE, in Qatar. And it's been something that we've seen for a very long time. Even the very divide of. I'm sorry. Are we still live?
Yeah, we're live.
Okay, no, I don't know why. It's a for some reason it showed me that we're not. I don't know. For some reason, my phone, my screen got kicked off for some reason. Very strange. Anyways, yes. So we see the effects of this going on today, and I think that um, we have to be conscious of that. I mean, yes, there's we always talk about accountability, on our show, and we definitely encourage that. I think we're not trying to take away any of the blame that we may have on ourselves, but at the same time, we also have to be very conscious of the fact that there are foreign or other hands that are in the pot here, right? And we have to call them out, just like we'll call out our own problems and people within our own organizations or groups or ummah. We should also call these people out and say, look, hey, if you guys really want to rid, you know, Mali of extremism, and you want to get rid of this economic instability, which is fueling this, sectarian type war in Mali, you could do that tomorrow if you wanted to, right? I
Yeah.
mean, but there's a reason why they haven't done that, and I
Mort.
think we should definitely be questioning why they haven't gotten involved yet, or to the extent that they need to. And I think Sim is right. Africa is a place that is very rich with resources. Mali itself is very rich with gold. As a matter of fact, Sim, this. I used to be in Dubai, and I used to actually buy product from Africa.
Right.
And I had a Malayan seller, and he was telling me that we have so much gold here, but they've made it so difficult because what they've done now too is another thing. When a country like Mali is going through certain things like this, they call it a conflict zone. And what that means is now to bring product like diamond and gold and silver and tungsten and copper, it gets flagged. So it becomes very difficult to actually buy raw product and refine it because you have to go through special procedures. Like you have to have documents like certificate of origin, certificate of non-criminal origin, or certificate of ownership, and then you have to have certificates of export, right? And clean money. Now, all these things they make up, and who ultimately benefits from this? That means that common sellers, regular local miners or traders, they can't find seller or buyers who can number one, work with them, and number two, they have to pay for all these documents out of their pockets. So how can an average local artisan miner, from a local village, be able to pay all of these crazy fees to the government? So gold stays there, the resources stay there, and then you have these multinational corporations that can influence these governments and get those export papers they need, and they eat up all the resources, and the price goes down because nobody's buying. Nobody can buy it. So they lose on so many fronts. There is an economic aspect to this that people sometimes overlook. They say, oh, it's Africa. What's in Africa? Who cares about Africa? Africa is so underdeveloped. Yes, but there's a reason why it's underdeveloped. And I think this is, like Sim mentioned, this is part of the reason why colonial powers like France like to see chaos in these countries, like Sudan that has oil, right? Or Libya and Mali. That's why they keep fueling this thing between Morocco and the Sahrawiin. Places like this, we have to keep that, in mind when looking at the whole picture.
Yeah. I'm going to go ahead and show the listeners a clip of something our crack team at the Medal
Des autorités et des membres du gouvernement malien en visite à Ogosago, un village du centre du Mali, théâtre du massacre d'au moins 134 membres de la communauté Peul. La délégation, constituée entre autres des ministres de la Justice et de la Jeunesse, est arrivée dans un village fantôme où des cases calcinées témoignent de la violence de l'attaque de samedi.
130 people.
Les populations locales ont perdu leurs moyens de subsistance en quelques heures et dépendent de l'aide du gouvernement de Bamako. Dimanche, le premier ministre Soumaïlou Boubèye Maïga a annoncé le limogeage de l'état-major de l'armée, accusé d'avoir mis plusieurs heures à réagir alors qu'il avait été informé immédiatement dès le début de l'assaut. De la même manière, la ministre Dannan Ambassako, composée de chasseurs d'Ogon, accusée d'être responsable du massacre, a été dissoute. Cette attaque est inédite au Mali, mais elle était prévisible, soulignent des experts maliens, qui mettent à l'index la faiblesse de l'État qui peine à reprendre le contrôle du pays depuis la fin de l'intervention de l'armée française en 2013.
So to rectify or to punish those who were involved, the president of Mali, his name is Abu Bakr, Prime Minister Abu Bakr, or President Abu Bakr, I think. They sacked a couple generals and they disbanded some organization that was set up to hunt Al-Qaeda or the jihadist movement. I'm not sure if it's Al-Qaeda because they say Al-Qaeda, but it's a very loose term that they use to label all the jihadist groups. So I'm always wary of utilizing the word Al-Qaeda because I'm not sure how accurate that is. But anyway.
Well, let's be honest for a moment, just since we're talking about this. Al-Qaeda is an umbrella term, right? It just means anyone that's an Islamist that
utilizing violence,
like, and maybe advocating Sharia law. Like for a while, they were calling us Shabab Al Qaeda. They were calling, any kind of group, Boko Haram Al Qaeda, right? And I think, and to a certain degree, I think Al Qaeda did embrace that, and they said, you know what, fine, you want to call it, go ahead, call it. We're all part of a muqawama or like a resistance or whatever. But essentially, these groups, even within these ranks, there is a lot of differences between these groups, and a lot of them just kind of use the umbrella term because it kind of adds to the boogeyman effect. Like, oh yeah, we're this and we're that, right? They don't mind that they're labeled the wrong way because it kind of gives them a deeper presence, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's really a big mess over there, and you have to understand that creating ethnic tensions between these various groups, whether it's the Fulani or the Tuareg in the northern part of Mali. The Tuareg is really what is the mix of Berber and Arab people. These are various tribes that are scattered throughout the Sahel region of Africa. So getting them to fight each other, causing mistrust amongst each other, this is all part of their game. This is part of them creating that conflict paradigm that we've been talking about lately on recent episodes, where these people now have fear among each other, and instead of uniting on their Islamic identity, they have mistrust regarding their ethnic identity, and they're now going to be purchasing weapons from the death dealers in Washington and the UK and France and so on, and they're going to make sure that they're armed to the teeth, and instead of feeding their families and taking care of their villages and building dams and all the different things that their colonial master has essentially created ethnic tensions between them. They've got them to fight about things that they never thought they would ever fight about, which is their ethnicity. These are people who, this is North Africa. This is a melting pot before there were melting pots, So
no, you're right.
It's really
and I think this is the age-old tactic of divide and conquer.
Yeah.
Right? Don't trust your neighbor. Yeah. Don't trust somebody you've been living next to for 100 years. Like your families know each other, going back centuries. Don't trust them. Yeah. Fight them. They're ideologically opposed to you. They try to make them feel like they're going to the Dogon and trying to make the other Fulani tribe appear to be as invaders or outsiders. Do you notice what's happening here, right? The idea that these are kind of like invaders, and they're not your same, they don't share your cultural values. So you have to push them out, right? They're not compatible with your values, right? It's kind of like an extension of some of the policies they're trying to push and incorporate in the Western world. Maybe not as bold, and I believe that some of these individuals, if they could do to certain minorities what, for example, happened in Mali recently, if they could get away with doing that in the Western world, they probably would do it. Oh, the problem is they're held by their own laws, right? They can't do it. Yeah. So what they do is they try to, but they know the tactic works very well, because fear is a very powerful emotion. Fear has driven a lot of people to do a lot of different things, some good things, some bad things. But we always know that dictators and regimes and even scholars that want to use religion, fear is a very important tool to use in order to control people, right? And I think they're doing that exactly the same way in Mali.
So someone's saying that I want to believe you guys, but I don't think there's enough. There's no evidence for your claims. So I mean, I don't know what evidence you actually need to understand the dynamics of the region. It seems like something's just kind of going over your head. I think Bush did 9/11 is saying that in the chat. Now, it's fairly easy to understand if you understand the way regional politics are conducted all over the world, or if you understand colonialism at all, you understand that what the colonial masters, the UK, the French, the Dutch, these guys all carved up regions all around the world that were they created boundaries between ethnic regions and made sure that there's conflict between neighbors, between neighboring countries, so that there can be conflict after they leave the region. So it's not very complicated here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to understand that colonialism in Mali goes back to like the 1800s, right? Where they actually Mali wasn't even these weren't even countries. Like Ghana and Mali and these places were all like, these were like big kingdoms. And they actually went in there. They actually created this French Africa, and they would force them to work in labor. They would force them to create textiles, and they would force them to create. There were like other kinds of exports like peanuts and cotton industry. I mean, so many different things they would do. And essentially, they placed in a Malayan guy who was an Uncle Tom, pretty much, and they made him like the governor of the area, and they would force the rule over them. So, I mean, you're talking about an area that was Mauritania, Senegal, Niger, Burkina Faso, Ghana. These areas were all done. How do you think these countries came about? I mean, was it some? Yeah. Do you think that the Africans somehow decided to call themselves Ghanaians, or they were able to call themselves Burkina Fasans, or I mean, what do you?
Well, I think a lot.
I don't see what the question is. I mean, if you want to look at, what we're talking about, just look at what the British Empire did to India. Yeah. It's a clear example. They admitted to it. They actually admit that this was their plan all along. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. I don't see what exactly is the issue.
Well, we can talk a little bit more about colonialism on an episode dedicated to colonialism, but let's move on and talk about some of the other happenings around the world. A lot of people are talking about how sympathetic New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Arden was recently regarding the terror attacks in New Zealand, and rightfully so. She did definitely go out of her way and making sure that she did her job as a leader, right? She went and she consoled the people who were hurt from the people who were suffering from the violence. And I think in order to understand this a little bit better, we have to understand that Jacinda Arden, I'm not doubting her intentions and her sincerity. She could definitely be everything that the cameras have showed her to be. A caring person, a humanitarian in every respect. But we have to understand that she is also someone who ran on an anti-immigration platform. She's someone who is also sending her troops all over the Middle East, and it's not just the Middle East. They're in Africa. They're in the Middle East. There's a heavy presence of New Zealand military around the world, and these people are not genuinely looking out for the best interests of Muslims. Now, maybe she's definitely appears to be, taking care of the issues at home by, passing the assault rifle ban and, making sure that the Muslim citizens of her country are, feeling welcome and they feel safe. She's doing the best she can in that respect. But as far as supporting her being as a Muslims wanting a leader like Jacinda Arden, I think that's kind of crossing the line. We have to understand things within its perspective. As a local regional ruler, she's doing what she's supposed to be doing. She's taking care of their issues. They're a nation that's suffering right now, and she's taking the correct steps in healing their pain. Okay, no argument there. But as Muslims, when I hear people online talking about her being the role model for what other Muslim leaders should be, or what leaders around the world should be, that's a little bit different. And I don't think that's a fair comparison. I don't think that's what we should aspire our leaders to be. And this is a country that is part of the coalition of the willing, one of the active countries that are involved with boots on the ground across Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Sorry, I'm not sure if Syria, but definitely Iraq and Afghanistan, they have boots on the ground in some kind of support capabilities. So I'm not sure if they're actually fighting Muslims, but they are definitely on the ground providing logistics and other types of support.
Yeah, I mean, I think credit is due where it's due. And I will say that I am thankful for how she handled the situation. She could have handled it much worse, like many other people have, like many other leaders have in the past, and dismissed it, and just totally be very nonchalant about it. But she went out of her way to deal with some of those issues, and I applaud that.
Yeah.
But I think what needs to be recognized as well, too, though, is that is probably due to the spirit of people in New Zealand. Because, I think it kind of goes back to, the idea that your rulers that you have over you are a reflection of who you are as a people. So I think the credit really goes to New Zealanders themselves. A lot of them came out. I mean, some of these native Maoris have come out and, they came out and they showed love. They even did their traditional haka dances in order to show respect to the dead. And I think that environment, naturally having people like that, would have a president like, like Arden, right? Because of the fact that this is what the people want. I think if the people were different, maybe that might not have been, she may not have been so responsive. Regardless of that, I still definitely thank her for doing that. I think it's a good thing. However, I think Sim is right that we need to be careful what we wish for, right? Yes, we recommend or we highlight some of the good that she's done, and we appreciate that. But let's not make it seem like that we can forget or forgive everything else that she may or will do, and possibly even forget our own standard for what a government should be, right?
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, within Islam, we have a framework of what our ideal government should be. And I think we shouldn't forget that either. Sometimes we get, we just get a little bit emotional about the situation, and then kind of throw our eggs into one basket and be like, oh, she's the greatest thing in the world. And I think you got to be careful.
Yeah. So a lot of people will say, Sim, you're taking things a little too far. Yes, she did run on an anti-immigration platform, but that's because she has a far right in her country that is much more strict on immigration, and that's a valid claim. And I concede that claim that you are absolutely right. There is a far right in New Zealand that wants even more stricter controls on immigration, and there's her situation can be compared to situations like Angela Merkel in Germany, where she's having to take a stronger anti-immigration stand. So what I always tell young Muslims when they're trying to understand these things is that right now when you're facing the far right, trying to push you around and trying to make you change on things like immigration, sooner or later, right? Today is the bargaining chip of immigration, but tomorrow it could be Muslims as a bargaining chip. And that is why we, as citizens of the world, forget whether you're Muslim or non-Muslim, you have to take a stronger stand and tell your leaders, even though it's not politically convenient, even though you might lose the election, you need to stay principled, and you need to tell your country that this is what is right for us, and here's why. We are not suffering from immigration, or we're not, our country is not suffering from immigration, and you have to create a well thought out plan in changing the narrative, because you can't just keep on changing your morals just because the right wing is able to hit on certain things that the people are feeling strong with. You need to change the narrative, and you need to make sure that you bring out the best reasons why immigration is important in your country. You don't just say that, oh, we need to change it, and just to curry some votes. So I think that's something that we need to work on as a people in general.
Yeah, hey, I just saw an interesting comment in the room. I mean, the chat thing. I'm kind of taken aback by this. My friend was telling me that he learned in his Islamic Spain class, Sunnis believe in the Mahdi. Does that deal with caliphate? First, I heard of Sunnis and Mahdi. I don't know what Sunni scholars you've been listening to, but Al Mahdi is also within the Sunni books. It's predominantly relevant to one of the or the issues of Akhir Zaman, the end of times, and it is one of the final signs of the Day of Judgment. That's almost the coming of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam, and Sayyidina Isa will come after Al Mahdi comes, and there's ikhtilaf over the series of events that will happen and how he'll come and all these things. But we know that there is a figure, Al Mahdi, who will be from the household of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he will be the one who is a mujaddid or a reviver within Islam. And then under his rule, under his unification, Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam will come back, and he will eventually. There are narrations that say that he will break the cross and kill the swine. Now there's ikhtilaf over that, whether it's literal or metaphorical for other things. But the reality that and Sayyidina Isa will come back, and his main purpose is to kill ad-Dajjal, Masih ad-Dajjal, which is the Antichrist. So yes, in short, Muslims do believe, most of Muslims believe that in Al-Mahdi, that he will come back, and I'm not come back. He will be here at some point. But there's a lot of other stuff, and maybe we can do a series of that later on.
His name will be the same as the Prophet ﷺ's name. It will be Muhammad ibn Abdullah, and he will even resemble the Prophet in many respects. So, and the problem with a lot of these hadith is that you don't know how strong they are, and that's where a lot of the confusion happens, and that's why I kind of tend to avoid them. I used to love reading about this kind of stuff until I found out how weak a lot of these narrations are related to the Mahdi, and now I kind of avoid the subject in general. Do we know that there's a Mahdi coming? Do Sunnis believe in this? Yes, there's enough hadith pointing to this person coming.
There's a figure coming. Yes.
Okay. Now we don't know exactly whether the text is, correct related to this person.
Yeah, I mean the problem is that this subject is so. There's a lot to explain before we talk about it, so I think it might be better to probably maybe talk about it at a different time. But there is definitely mentioning of al-Mahdi in some classical text, and it's not only a Shia thing; it is also among the Sunni. But I think maybe Sim will bring, or maybe Sheikh Amr can come later on and do a series on that or something.
Well, it's nice that people are thinking about this, and it means that people are hoping for someone to save the world, right? But the problem is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't change the condition of a people until they change what is within themselves, right? So we have to change our own hearts, we have to change our minds, and we have to change our outlook on things, and we have to figure out what is Islam asking me to, in terms of how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking me to approach any situation, any given reality that I'm presented with. How do I approach it with the lens that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants me to look at it with? Should I look at it with a pragmatic lens, short-term solutions, trying to figure out how we can serve our best interests by getting some foreign power involved in solving our problems? Or should I really work for lasting change? Should I work for the thoughts and the ideas of our society to change, and so that we can have a lasting change that will last many generations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the question was more tied to, will that be a khilafah? And from the authentic hadith, we know that it will be a khilafah. It will be actually the final type of excuse me, when he does come, it'll be a khilafah on the manhaj of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, the hadith starts out with saying that, in the beginning there's going to be Khulafa Rashidun on the path of prophethood, and then after that it'll be a kingship, and then there will be abiding kingship, which means an oppressive kingship, and then after that period has ended, the Khilafat will return as on the path of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Yeah, exactly. And so so right now we're in that phase of the hadith where we call it mulkun jabriya, which is like the oppressive, like the very oppressive and tyrannical type of rule, not the one that is based in injustice. So yes, essentially yes. And there have been and I know your non-Muslim friend brought that up, but there have been people who have studied the rise and fall of empires, and a lot of them say that right now in the future there's going to be only one of two options. Either it will be democracy, or whatever democracy is today, that will lead forward, or it'll be something like a revival of a Islamic type empire, something theocratical. And so this might be an indication of them recognizing that some of the, it could be, some kind of, it's interesting to note that they recognize that as well too. But yes, essentially, yes, there will be, we believe at the end of time, there will be a khilafah. I mean, there's no doubt about that. It will return to that. And for those of you that are, that have this mentality similar, a lot of people say, you know what, that, I can't wait for Al-Mahdi to come back and everything's going to be fine. I think you brought up a very important point that that you have to change the condition of yourselves before Allah will change, the condition of the people, right? So the thing is that, and also the other thing to note is that every qarn, or 100 years, or generation, you should say, something like this, depending on how you define it, there will be a reviver, right? Regardless of whether he will be Al-Mahdi or not or whatever, but there will be a reviver in some way, shape, or form. Whether it's the religion, understanding of religion, or it's the actual statehood, but there is, Allah keeps infusing the ummah with a reminder every qarn, every generation that follows. There is always one in that generation.
Mort, do you think there's a reviver right now? No, I don't know. But by reviver, the Arabic term is mujaddid. So a lot of times people are, they give, for example, earlier on in the episode we were talking about Sheikh Uthman Dan Fodio, and he was called the mujaddid of his time. He was someone who revived the religion in West Africa. He established Islam throughout West Africa, and he established a land that was ruled with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's laws, and it was just, it was merciful to its people, and its people loved their ruler, and the ruler loved them. And it was amazing. It was very beautiful what they had accomplished, and to this day, many people just talk about the Sokoto Khilafah that he built in very glowing terms. But in your estimation, Mort, do you think there is a reviver right now?
If there is one, I don't know of him.
So
it could be maybe someone like, I don't want to put too much hope in one person right now, but I think Erdogan might come the closest to someone that is kind of infusing this Islamic spirit into his people and reviving his people on in their idea of their past and their history and their Islamic identity. But is he a reviver for the entire Muslim world? I don't know, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a reviver for the entire Muslim world. Can it just be a reviver for does each individual qawm have or like nation have their region have their own? It could be, Allahu alam.
Yeah, there's various interpretations.
Other one is, I think, definitely someone who's reviving some Islamic spirits in his country, at least.
Just to provide some context around the term mujaddid, some scholars differ that the mujaddid is an all-encompassing term, meaning he transcends regions, that he's someone who transforms or gives new breath to Islam around the world, and then some scholars feel that the mujaddid is a regional person, that he revives Islam within the region, or maybe it could be both as well, right, Mort? Why
it could
not?
be, Allahu Alam. I mean, because Danfodio didn't really move Islam outside of outside of Africa, right? I mean, it was virtually unheard of. I don't know. Someone says Noman Ali Khan could be a mujaddid in this area. I don't know about that. I think maybe he might be in the field of Islamic or Quranic studies, perhaps. But I don't think that. I mean, again, that would be regional within America or the Western world, maybe. But I don't know if that would, because the Western world typically didn't ever had it in the first place. So I don't know if that would be I mean, I'm not downplaying any of his work at all. I just don't think he's at the level of someone that we'd call a mujaddid.
Yeah,
you kind of have to have more than just a religious impact, right? Meaning a theological impact. It has to be a little bit more than that. We're talking about the general welfare of people, calling to the Islamic methodology. Generally, someone who they could basically anybody could come out with and say he has undoubtedly upright character, right? And like, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of people know.
So a lot of times the mujaddid is actually his effects are felt after his death. That usually towards his end of his reign is when people like realize like, man, this person, he really changed the way Islam was going, and he lifted Islam back up, and he and this is all by the will and permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're not ever giving someone so much credibility that they're above their status, but we have to understand it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives them this wisdom and these capabilities to protect his faith and to continue spreading the faith throughout the world. So whether Noman Ali Khan or whatever superstar scholar there is out there, whether they are or not is something that we'll find out after their death and see what the effect is.
And I think there has to be some kind of emphasis on the amount of impact too. I mean, we're talking about people like, the calibers of like, Abdul Qadir al-Jazairi, I mean, like Umar Mukhtar. You have to understand that these are names that carry weight, like Junaid al-Baghdadi. People, when you hear names like Umar bin Abdul Aziz, like the impact that they have, right? Think about that for a moment. Think about who brings that kind of change, right? It's not, I mean, we talked about this before too. Imam Shamil in the Caucasus, right? This is someone that you can say bears a lot of weight. He defended Islam. He spread it through the region. He gave a name and izzah for Islam, right? So there's more than just an idea of being theological. And generally, I hate, I don't want to go off too much off the topic, but it generally involves actually even physical activity in defense for Islam. I mean, very rarely do you find a mujaddid that didn't have that active participation in that. Like he actually defended the borders of Islam and actually called people to defend the oppressed. So I think that is definitely one of the characteristics of a mujaddid or of the mujaddideen that we've seen in the past.
I mean, if you think about Imam Bukhari, right? I haven't heard of any scholar say that when they were living in his time that he was a mujaddid, and for sure he was, without a shadow of a doubt, he was a reviver. But I haven't heard of any scholars refer to him as a mujaddid, like, oh, I'm being, in my discourse with mujaddid, already giving him that title before his time has passed. This is the kind of stuff that doesn't happen until usually the person has passed and the effects are felt throughout the world.
Yeah, and also another thing you have to realize too is I think one of the things that we have to realize is usually a mujaddid is somebody in a position of power, right? The ability to implement the law of Allah, right? And this is very important because, this was actually, since you brought this up, this is one of the criticisms that some people had of Imam Bukhari, that he never got politically involved. He never picked a side. And that kind of, and Allahu Alam why he didn't. I mean, he was focused on a hadith. But what I'm saying though is that generally the mujaddideen that we've seen in the past, they were generally in a position to say, hey, look, we're going to give power to the ummah. We're going to be in a position of powership where people look to them for leadership and for stability and for their rights and things like that. Like, for example, a great example is Muzaffar Qutb, right? He actually kind of literally defended Islam against the Mongols, when it was all hope was lost. If it wasn't for his revival of that Islamic spirit. and the Imam Malik that came afterwards, it would have been a very dangerous period for Islam, right? So I think there's a very general term of using the word mujaddid, and then there's like an understood meaning when we're talking about figures in history. So I think there's a little bit more to the criteria when you're talking about an Islamic personality in history.
All right, guys. If you guys don't have any more questions, we're going to wrap this baby up. More. What do we have on the agenda? Oh, check out our New Zealand T-shirts that we're selling on our Teespring website. We'll include a link in the description below. Make sure you click on that and support the victims of the tragedy in New Zealand in whatever way you can. There's also what else do we have going on?
Yeah, so before we do that, let's just kind of laugh at the Mueller report for a little bit.
Oh. I'm glad you brought that up. Rachel Maddow, right?
I feel bad for the Democrats.
Rachel Maddow is like
happy.
Yeah, Rachel Maddow is one of the Democrats who's on, MSNBC. She's the biggest, one of the biggest person holding the torches against Trump and using this Mueller report as a way to delegitimize him. And
yeah, it's going to be crazy. They're going to impeach him. Trump Jr. is going down. Ivanka's going down. Everybody's going down. The whole White House is burning down. And then it ends up, you know what this kind of moment was like, Sim? It was like that moment when I saw Hillary Clinton supporters started breaking down when Trump won.
The whole thing was concocted by
polling live, and they were crying and like bawling and going, why?
No, Mort, make no mistake about it. This whole Mueller thing was started by the Hillary Clinton type Democrats, the people who supported her. They wanted a reason why she actually lost the election, and they need to answer to their donors, all the people who contributed to their campaign, and they have to explain to them like, hey, this is the reason why. And
I think the other thing is also the sad thing is that they're not letting it go. They still want to keep pushing for other things. And I'm like, how embarrassing. Like, stop. Dude, just stop it. Like, I think I've told you before, Sim. I told you I think Trump is going to win 2020. I know he's going to win it. Yeah. And it's going to be very hard.
They've given him all the ammo he needs now.
This is a victory on a platter now. I mean, they were riding on all of this. If something were to come out, then it would have been like, oh, Trump is backward and evil. But this just vindicates him. He can walk around like Emperor Trump right now and do whatever the hell he wants to do now. I mean, literally, watch, and I'm guaranteeing you, you're going to see that Trump over the next month or two, he's going to be blasting the left on Twitter, in the news. He's just going to go all out. He's going to have a field day with this.
All the smart leftist writers, people like Glenn Greenwald of The Intercept, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, they're all saying for the longest time, hey, forget about this stupid Mueller report. This is not how you take down Trump. Talk about Trump preceding, before the Mueller report, because the Mueller report was scoped on the focus of its investigation was on just the election. But they were saying, like, if you want to actually have an investigation, dig into Trump's connections with Russia prior to the election, where Trump was essentially a money launderer for the Russians, and that's how,
Bank, right? We're talking about stuff like that, But look, I think right now any hope of having a case going forward is done. Yeah. Nobody wants to waste any more taxpayer dollars, right? And you know what I think would be extremely funny, if somehow in the reports stuff leads back to Hillary Clinton and they charge her and she gets like jail time. I'll laugh so hard if that happens. Yeah. I think the Democrats will be destroyed.
The problem is the establishment Democrats, and they've completely ruined the reputation of the left. They've completely all credibility in whatever the Democratic Party says is lost because of the establishment Democrats, and I think they're in need of rescue, because it seems like that whole ship can tank in the next elections, the way this is headed. Because now you've given Trump every single piece of ammunition that he needs to take him down, because this was a failed attempt. You know the old adage, Mort, right? If you're going to take a shot at the king, better make sure you
kill him.
Make sure you kill him. And now he's going to murder
center
him.
mass and take him out. Otherwise, he's going to come back and be ruthless on you. He's going to eat you alive. And Trump loves the media, especially when he's right. That's where he shines. Have they not learned this lesson about Trump yet? He shines in the media, especially when he's right about something. So why would you give him something that in which he can excel in his own natural habitat? The guy is an entertainer. He is he literally feels comfortable at home in the limelight. So now you're giving him ammunition to feel right and to declare victory and be vindicated while he has a platform in an election year. My God.
Here, let me read
good luck.
Let me read Glenn Greenwald's tweet. The Mueller investigation is complete, and this is a simple fact that will never go away. Not one single American was charged, indicted, or convicted for conspiring with Russia to influence the 2016 election. Not even a low-level volunteer. The number is 0. I love that. He just nails it.
No collusion, basically. That's what it translates to. No collusion.
Yeah. Not even a low-level person. Not even, you'd think that they'd find someone to pin it on, and nope, nothing. Nothing there. Well, apparently there's things that can be investigated, but for all intents and purposes, the way it's going to the director of the Justice Department, and he's a stooge of Trump, and he's going to close down the investigation right away.
Yeah, I mean, they lost their chance.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear. If they start something else, they're going to be like, oh my God, this again? Like this again, really? You know what I mean? Like they're tired of it now. It's done. We're tired about hearing about collusion and Trump and all this stuff. Show me what you can do different, right? And here's the problem. I've been saying this before. If you remember when I said before, the Democrats are not running on policies. They're running on the hope that Donald Trump gets caught, right? That's all they've been running on.
Yeah.
And he didn't get caught. So now who do they have? They have Tulsi Gabbard, crazy 0.75% Native American, what's her name?
Elizabeth Warren.
Elizabeth Warren. Then you have we're not sure about his status, Cory Booker. You know what I mean? Like we don't even know what he's doing. And then you have they're gonna label him the communist, Bernie Sanders and creepy Joe Biden. Like who are they gonna run against Trump? He is going to slaughter anybody that comes against him. Yeah, you guys are done. If you're a Democrat right now, do not vote.
I still think Bernie could have a chance if they all get behind Bernie. Bernie
could have a chance if Trump had something in this. It's even a little hair of a lie.
Yeah.
But now this is going to galvanize Trump support and even people who are not Trump supporters and be like, look, they're trying to take this man down because he's doing something right. I mean, even people are wrong. I mean, whatever they think is, whatever is right and wrong, but that's just the propaganda that's going to galvanize, his base. And they're just going to it's going to embolden Trump. He's going to come out and say, they've been trying for 4 years. 4 years, they didn't let me get anything done. I could make America so much better. I mean, I can just imagine the rhetoric now when he comes on stage. It's over for the Democrats. Don't even think about it.
Yeah.
Poor Bernie. He got in at the wrong election cycle when the Democrats goofed this up. If the Democrats were smart, they would have let Bernie run in 2012, 2016, and they would have easily beat Trump. But stupid, dumb Democrats, were big on this whole gender diversity crap, and they tried to put Hillary Clinton up front, and they got screwed for it. They're paying for it now. R.I.P. Democratic Party.
It's over. It's over. And
done.
I wish I could tell you guys. I mean, we're by no means, no stretch of the imagination, we want Trump to be the president, but that is what it's shaping out to be. So
we call spade, right?
Get ready for another 4 years, folks, because this is
MAGA 2020.
This is going to be horrible. Anyway, guys, that's our show for the evening. If you guys have any questions, comments, or concerns, make sure you let us know in the comments section below. Give this video a thumbs up, and make sure you hit like and subscribe on our channel. We need your support. We can't do it without you, folks. Tell your family members to do it. subscribe, and hopefully
Patreon.
Yes, and support us on patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks. All right. For my co-host Mort, my name is Sim. We'll see y'all on the flip side. Assalamu alaikum.